Brett McMurphy's tweet, and for those that are driving around, I'll read it to you. Big Ten, SEC, reads the headline, unlikely to add Florida State if it leaves ACC and ACC survives, sources told Action Network headquarters. Big Ten and SEC don't want FSU because adding FSU doesn't make financial sense, no desire to expand, and, quote, they've been a disruptive partner, sources said. Now, Brett McMurphy, now I'm going to read my response or what I posted. Brett McMurphy is a respected reporter. I'm not besmirching Brett McMurphy. I'm sure a source said that. I don't believe he made it up. I don't think he just decided to type that out, snatch it out of thin air. But it's not exactly something that should worry you because this kind of thing, this sort of speculation that goes on amongst all parties covering the game these days. I mean, this is conference realignment has been the upheaval and the story in college football along with NIL for some time now. So it's not surprising somebody would say that and that he would then, quote that and cite it. I immediately posted, and I had to Google search for the image, but I remembered it, and then I found it. Previously, right before the Big Ten snatched Oregon and Washington, amongst others, there was a similar sounding story that had been posted in which it said, Big Ten interest has cooled on Pac-12 teams. After the anxiety caused last week regarding further Big Ten expansion, industry sources indicated that the Big Ten is no longer interested in adding Cal, Oregon, Stanford, and Washington. Rights holders were balking at paying the same amount for those schools as the 16 Big Ten schools going forward, $80 million to $100 million in total revenue. So the interest had cooled until it didn't, until they added Washington and Oregon. And this is the kind of thing that you see all the time for a lot of reasons, and I'll continue to reiterate this. First of all, the threat of litigation and not wanting to be associated with anything that sounds remotely like tampering, like some sort of wink, nod agreement, like an inducement or some sort of proactive effort to bring in a program like Florida State or Clemson or anybody else for that matter while they have an existing contract with another conference, while they are still under contract with that conference, while there is a lawsuit, in fact, multiple lawsuits going on currently. There's none of those people that would be in a position to perhaps be involved in a negotiation of any kind by which Florida State would leave this conference and then find themselves in the Big Ten or the SEC, the Big 12 for that matter, would want to be on the hook for a lawsuit if they were shown to have been tampering and in any way engaged with a program that then indeed makes that switch. So they're never going to say to Brett McMurphy or anybody else, yes, we would love to have Florida State and Clemson, and for that matter, North Carolina and Virginia, and while we're at it, Miami. They're not going to say it. It's just never going to be said. So almost by definition, anything reported on this is never going to feature a counter to McMurphy's source today, right? That you're never going to see that there are, say, 9 other guys in the Big Ten or the SEC going, oh, I'd love to have them. You're never going to hear from them. And you're never certainly going to hear from the commissioner because he's not going to put himself anywhere close to that. And then in the appearance of that, anything like it. So they're not going to come out and ever say that. And they're scared to death of lawsuits. And I would be too. And so it makes total sense that they would not do that. And, our talking point all along has been conference commissioners and most certainly school ADs don't have much say in this changing landscape anymore. Ironically, the more power that a Big Ten gains financially with television contracts and the SEC the same, ironically, as they grow and have more power and make more money, their presidents and athletic directors have less say in where they end up or what happens next to the conference that they're in. You recall that the talking point that the SEC did not want to expand because school presidents and athletic directors didn't want to have to share the money and give in to an even bigger piece of the pie by adding more teams. Yeah, until they didn't, until they added more teams, until seemingly out of left field, they added Texas and Oklahoma. Remember, there were promises made for years in the SEC that we would never take a team in a state in which we already had an existing member. So, you don't have to worry about it. If you're Texas A&M and you get the invite to go to the SEC and then you don't have to worry about Texas coming in. Oh, wait, you did. Turns out they turned their back on that agreement and that deal. And in fact, saw the opportunity to increase and enhance a television contract and an image and a status, and decided, yeah, let's bring in Texas and Oklahoma. That was at the infuriating expense of a Texas A&M representative stomping up and down. But you said, yeah, well, sorry, we lied. What, are you going to leave? You'll hear that, well, it doesn't make financial sense and or we're not interested. The really salacious quote is disruptive partner. And as my colleague Ira Schafel pointed out in his tweet, we're in a business, college football that is, where there is nothing but problematic partners. It's how we got here. It's disruptive partners existed, and it's what led to musical chairs. Everybody looking out for themselves is what's led to this. College football, you would say, has taken a beating because of disruptive partners and the need to make sure that they're positioned in the right spot financially moving forward. If everybody was doing what was best for college football and looking out for their brethren in the game, we would not have seen any of this. But of course, all of this has happened, and all of this has happened over and over and over again, usually within, a year of somebody saying definitively somewhere that this, and this will not happen, and then this, and this happens. And nobody ever goes back and is like, wait a minute, but you said things changed, the information changed, the deal changed, different offers happened. And in the McMurphy article in the Action Network piece, he basically says as much. You got to go down a little bit, but eventually you get to a place where there's a quote in which somebody says, well, no, never say never. Things can change. It's the ever-changing world of college football. If people left the ACC and the ACC was in disarray, and then suddenly those programs were available, then maybe they would add them. Oh, you don't say. Could have just led with that.
The number one thing that I thought of as I read the quotes, and the fact that it was citing mostly SEC, which is where the meetings are right now. So that's the recent quotes that Brett got. And then there's some, tangentially connected Big Ten sources who are willing to say the same thing. It's the devil's advocate. It's Keanu Reeves with that terrible fake Gainesville accent. Are we negotiating, Dad? Always. That's what's happening to me right now. It's a control of the message by the folks who are trying to pull strings from chancellors' offices and presidents of universities who are trying to drive the price down. They don't want to be played at the 11th hour by a free agent Florida State who is going to go from the big phone call to the SEC phone call. It's what we were talking about towards the end, which is towards the end of last week, which is if and when Florida State is free and clear, you're not going to get a call from just one Power 2 conference. You've already been talking to one clearly, at least one. And the commissioner of the SEC said so yesterday. Not the only phone calls I've fielded are Texas and Oklahoma. He can't help himself. So you've had talks with these particular conferences. But if and when you're a free agent, they don't want to be one-upped. They don't want to be played. And so if you can start to tilt the scales in the public to say, well, you're not even valuable. You're not even valuable. Maybe then they can get a better deal, a better circumstance for Florida State to say yes. They can drive that price down versus full share versus non-full shares at the beginning. They won't offset some of the legal costs. They won't offset some of the exit fees like they did for Texas and Oklahoma. They offset those penalty fees paid to the Big 12, did ESPN. They're trying to drive down their own costs. That's what I took from it. But then again, if you do read the article from top to bottom, there's at least 3 instances of obvious and blatant hedges by the sources themselves and by Brett himself. the code they used with the Big Ten, or sorry, with the Pac-12 that the Big Ten had used was, we don't want to be perceived as somebody who broke up another conference. You don't care if your legacy is you torpedoed a conference. You care if you're liable for torpedoing a conference.